It'll only stay romantic if you're in sync financially. If you're not close enough to that person to be able to talk about money, then it may not be the right person to be married, or you may not have been dating long enough. How do I get rich? And I tell them the way to get rich is to spend, spend, spend. So the first thing is to pay yourself first. The second thing is automate your savings. The next thing is start an emergency fund. So there's 3 buckets of money. The most important is your investment account. That is money that you own. That's money that you can control. And then one last thing I want to put on that is, we talk about finance, and I think the most important job you ever have in your life is that of a parent. And when my kids were growing up, I took it upon myself to make sure that they had all of life's lessons. Live healthy, be good to people, be a likable person, but also be very financially responsible.
Yeah.
And we started at a very young age. They started learning about how to save. And the way I know we'll get into this later on, but the way that I've taught my kids to do things is by example. Mm-hmm. I wanted them, money was never a taboo subject with us. I know with a lot of families, and especially earlier generations than mine, my parents, that money was not something that you discussed with your kids. I did not believe that. I wanted my kids to know everything that I was doing. I wanted to know why I was spending X amount on a house or on a car or on a vacation, or why I wasn't spending money on certain things. I wanted them to have the values of knowing what to spend on, what was important, and what wasn't important.
You're definitely right, and I agree with you 100%. But why do most parents feel like money is not a topic that they should have conversation with their kid?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I've talked to a lot of different parents about this. And sometimes parents give me the answer that I don't want to burden my kids with financial problems yet. Or they don't have enough knowledge to be able to speak intelligently to their kids about money. A lot of people were not raised with a financial background. So they don't really know. It could be that either the wife or the husband, or sometimes they have a manager that handles their finances, and they're just not equipped to have those conversations. And I debunk all of that. I said, listen, you're a parent. You've raised your kids. You live in a nice city or a nice place. You know something about financial literacy. So make sure that whatever it is you know, to impart that on your kid. We always had conversations with our kids from the time literally they were 8, 9, 10 years old about money. And so they became very comfortable with it.
Why do you think it's so important for young people to start learning personal finance or how to manage their money in general at early stage of their life?
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess the key word that would come up is because the word is habits. Learning and forming good habits. The earlier you learn how to do the right things, the more, again, that word compound is going to come up, the more it will compound in the future. If you learn how to save, if you learn what percentage of salary to take home, how to invest, what to do, how to bucket your money, it will come back in spades to help you as you get older. There's a saying that I have, and it's learning the difference between owned money and rented money. And I talk about that in my book. Owned money is yours. It's money that can never be taken away. Rented money is fleeting. Rented money is things like your salary. You don't know if your job is going to be there tomorrow. You want to make sure that you get as much money from your rented money bucket. So for example, if you're making a salary, take that money and get as much money into your owned money category as you possibly can. That's money that can never be taken away from you. So the key is to form the right habits, to make sure you save or invest as much as you can. The earlier that you can hit your bucket number, the earlier you can look at the freedom in your life. We were talking about something earlier before this started, the FIRE movement.
Yes.
FIRE movement is financial independence, retire early. Well, I'm not a believer in retiring, so I've kind of flipped that a little bit, and I call it FIPA, financial independence, pivot anytime. I'm in a position in my life right now where I can do anything that I want at any time. I don't have to worry about getting to a job at a certain time. If my wife and I want to go travel, we can go travel. If we want to spend time, if I want to go play tennis or golf or go out to a movie, I can do whatever I want whenever I want to do it. That's because I was very smart when I was younger. I got as much money into my owned category, and I can live on the dividends and the interest very comfortably.
But I think one most important thing that I think most young people don't realize is time is actually their like biggest asset.
100%. Time. You know, we were talking about this a little earlier. The reason I love talking to young people so much, not only can I be impressionable upon them, but if they start now, you know, people say, well, when should our kids start saving? When should they start earning money? And my answer to that always is yesterday. Start yesterday. If you didn't start yesterday, start last night. If you didn't start last night, start today. Do not waste any time on your financial journey. The earlier you start saving, and I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's $5 or $10 a week, or if you're earning money, it's a little bit more. But get into the habit of saving and investing. The sooner you do it, the more it compounds. People don't understand how important compound interest is. And if you start doing it early, you'll see the effect that it's going to have. And by the way, there's the opposite effect, compound debt. I always teach kids, your biggest enemy is your credit card.
Oh yeah.
You do not want to get wrapped up in a credit card. Now, I have credit cards, my kid has credit cards, my wife has credit cards. Of course, we all have credit cards. And there's some advantages to credit cards. It helps you build credit, and you need credit in order to get loans for cars or for houses or whatever it is you're doing in life. But make sure that when you spend money on a credit card, you're cheating. You have the money already put away in your savings account that you can pay it off the day that credit card bill comes in. So credit card is just there as a vehicle to build your credit. Don't think about it as something that I'm going to use to go out and spend more money. Or, oh, you know what, I've got a $10,000 limit on my credit card. I'm going to go out and spend $800 on a dinner. Or I'm going to go buy those expensive pair of pants or a new dress or something. Don't think about it that way. That's not what that's there for. Whatever is in your account, that's how much you can afford. The credit card is just a vehicle to help build your credit.
Speaking of credit card, I think so the reason why I had credit card was I was thinking, you know, I should build my credit score. Right. And I don't think most young generations understand how credit score works.
Yeah, so the credit score is the only reason to have a credit card. It's the only reason to have a credit card is to build your credit score. The higher your credit score is, the less money you'll be paying for interest. People have to understand your credit score is extremely valuable. It's extremely important, but only use it for the right reason. So for example, I have a daughter, one of my daughters, and when she graduated college, she had a very good job, and we went out looking for a car. And because her credit score was so high at an early age, she got the lowest interest rate they offered. It was under 2%. But these kids that don't have a good credit score or don't have anything prepared as far as their finances are concerned will be paying 3%, 4%, 5%, even more. That's how much a good credit score can help you. It will save you hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of your life.
And since we're talking about credit cards, let's also talk about debt. What are the good reasons that young people, you know, should consider a debt at the early stage of their life?
Yeah, I am, to me, debt is like a cancer. I am not a person that's in favor of debt for almost any reason. Now, I will say that sometimes somebody is studying a profession, they want to be a lawyer, an architect, a doctor, and that's not only their passion, and we'll talk about passions and strengths in a little bit, but it's their strength. It's what they know that they're meant to do. So that's the only time that I would ever say that debt is something probably worth having. Now, when you get into business, there's other kinds of debt.
Oh yeah.
And so that's a calculated risk. I've had debt a few times on a few businesses that I've had, but I knew that I had cash flow coming in and I knew I was able to pay that debt off. But I can tell you that I know a lot of people that got into big debt, businesses did not pay off, and they're still paying off that debt. One other thing about an education debt. That's the only debt that you cannot write off in bankruptcy. So just know that if you're taking out money for an education, that it is something that you will never, ever be able to get to work around.
So what is your stand on specifically student loan? Do you support it, or like what is your stand?
Yeah, so I'm mixed on this. I will try to explain it. I believe that it's extremely important that you evaluate the degree you're getting. If you feel it's a degree that will pay off in a few years, a professional degree, like being an architect, like being a doctor, like being a lawyer, like being an engineer, there's a good chance it will pay off. But if you're getting into something like social work, and social work is extremely important, we need social workers, but it takes so long to get that debt paid off, and the salaries are so low in those areas that in my mind, if it was my kids or somebody I was consulting, I would tell them to probably reconsider taking out debt for those positions, for that degree.
Oh yeah. So I think understand how if you do have a plan for the future, maybe taking on debt is a good option. But if you don't, maybe consider a different approach.
100%. And I'll go one step further. I would also consider the colleges and the universities that you're considering. A lot of people want to go to the big universities, take on big debt, but they don't even have a plan for their career. So what I'll advise to those people is go to a less expensive college that's in your neighborhood, a community college, or not an expensive four-year college, and just kind of get your feet wet. Find out what it is you really do enjoy doing or what you're really good at. And then the last 2 years, transfer to a school of note that you feel that's of note, and then you can say that you got your degree from them. But now you've only got 2 years of college that you're really paying for, because a community college or a lesser known college may be very inexpensive. You may be able to get an easier scholarship to those schools. So how much money you owe at the end of college is almost as important as the degree that you've gotten out of that college.
I see. And let's switch a gear back a little bit to the debit card topic. So what is the right way to use a debit card? What are some practical advices would you give to the young generations?
Yeah, so I like debit cards. If you're talking specifically about debit cards, because that's cash.
Yeah.
So that's money that you've got to put in your savings account, and so you have a debit card. But the debit card doesn't count for your credit score. Those are only credit cards. So I recommend everybody has a credit card. And by the way, it's also extremely important that the parents are involved with these decisions. And I know a lot of parents give the kids their credit cards. That's not helping anybody. That doesn't help the parent, and it doesn't help your child, because the child is not building credit on your credit card. So I recommend that you get your child the credit card, but limit their limit. So if you feel comfortable with your child having a $500 limit, limit it at $500. At $250, limit it at $250, $1,000, whatever that number is, whatever you both feel comfortable with. But make it the child's, the student's responsibility to make sure that credit card is paid off every month. And if you have an agreement, like we gave our kids an allowance when they were in college, so we gave them, I forgot what it was, they were in school so long ago, but let's say it was $500 a month, we helped them up to $500 a month. Anything over and above that $500, they were responsible for.
Yeah.
And we always told our kids to get summer internships. And they put away X amount of dollars over the course of the summer that was used towards whatever spending they needed. It was something we felt as parents we wanted to help them with. Of course, we would do that. But more importantly, I wanted them to understand what financial responsibility was.
Yes.
So we're paying for your school, and we're going to pay for your room and board. We're going to pay for all that. But anything over and above that is your responsibility. You're doing your kid a favor by giving them that responsibility. It may feel like, oh my gosh, how's my kid going to afford that? They'll figure out a way. And believe me, it's going to pay off in a big way when they graduate.
I definitely agree. And that is I think it's really long-term thinking, what you just said. But when it comes to, specific actions, kids can take when it comes to, making their credit score better. So I think my advice is never purchase something that is above 30% of your credit limit. So if you purchase one item that use full balance of your credit card, that is going to hurt your credit score actually. And also at the end of the month, pay the full balance so you don't pay any interests. Right? And what are some other specific advices would you give?
So I would say never use a credit card unless you can't pay for it right away.
Wow. Yeah.
That's how I view a credit card. If I can't write a check for it or transfer money into it right that day, I don't use my credit card. If I'm buying a suit, let's just say a suit, and my suit is going to cost $300. If I can't write a check for that right away, I don't use my credit card for it. It's telling me that I can't afford it. So I use a credit card, and I know the next day, if I want to pay off that credit card, I can. You've got to be hard with yourself. The harder you are with yourself today, the better you're off you're going to be tomorrow.
Delayed gratification, right?
Yes, exactly.
That's so
And
important.
one more piece of advice I'd give on that. If somebody really wants to buy something, don't buy it right away. Give yourself 24 or 48 hours to think about it.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you how many times with my kids where they wanted to buy something. I'll tell you some interesting stories about them. I can't tell you how many times my kid said, you know, Dad, I said, that's fine. Give it 24 hours, give it 48 hours. Tell me in 48 hours if you still really want that. More than half the time, they came back and said, you know what, Dad, I don't really think I need that. I don't really think I need to spend $100 on that or $50 on that. I don't really think I need to do that. It saved them so much money in the long run, you have no idea.
What are just in general the damaging spending behaviors that you see young kids have nowadays?
So let's talk about because this is the time I really see it the most. When somebody graduates college and gets their first job. And they're starting to make money for the first time. So I've written down, there's like 5 or 6 bullet rules that I have. The first thing that these kids do is they start spending like they're rich. They've got a paycheck coming in for the first time, and they're making whatever number it is, 30, 40, 50, $100,000, and they say, you know what? I'm rich.
They have that like lifestyle inflation, right?
Exactly right. And they start spending money like they're crazy, like it's crazy. That's the first mistake they make. The second thing is what they don't do is they ignore the most important thing is the first money needs to go towards savings and investing. That's the first money. And people say to me, well, how do I get rich? And I tell them the way to get rich is to spend, spend, spend. And they say, well, how do I get rich by spending? Because you want to be spending money on the right things.
Oh, yeah.
I want you to spend money on something that's going to be worth more tomorrow than it is today. If you go out and buy a car, that's going to depreciate as soon as you drive it off the driveway. If you go out and buy a suit or a dress or a piece of jewelry, or you go out for expense, that's gone. That money is gone. But if you take that money and you put it in an index fund, or you put that money into some kind of stock or real estate or something that will bring value, appreciation value, now you're on the right track. Mm-hmm. So if you want to be rich, spend, 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 just spend it on the right things. So that's the second thing. Yeah. The other mistake that people make is they do not have a budget. They don't have a plan. Every student starting in high school, go on Google, go on any kind of there's a lot of different sheets out there right now that you can do budgets on. Do a budget. Understand where your money is going. How much of your money, if you moved out, if you're not living at home after you graduate, you got a job, how much is going towards rent? How much is going towards transportation? Do you have a car? Do you take a train? How much is going towards that? How much is going towards your food and entertainment? How much of that money is going towards all that? But the key is, how much money are you saving? How much money are you investing? And I want to talk about that in a minute. But let me just talk about the other things. The other thing, something we touched on, is using credit cards like it's free money. It's not free money, it's debt. Let's go back to what I said before. If you don't have the money in your savings account or your checking account, do not make that purchase on a credit card. And then the last thing, which is kind of what my book is about, Smarter Minds, is not asking for help. To me, the most important thing and I'd like you to start when you get out of college or even while you're in college, is building your personal board of directors. And it's the most important thing. It's been my guiding light throughout my life. The reason I'm in the position I am is not because I'm so smart, because I'm not. It's because I have a lot of friends, and I have a lot of friends that are very smart, and I have a lot of friends that specialize in certain areas. I consult my friends about everything I do. If I'm buying a new car, if I'm going on vacation, if I'm buying a company, if I'm investing in a stock, I have 2 or 3 or 4 people that I call before I do anything. So my biggest recommendation to young people is to get a personal board of directors. And I have a saying, pick who you trust and trust who you pick. Make sure that you pick people that are there for the right reasons. It usually, when you're younger, it starts out with family members, but eventually it turns out to be other people that are in your circle that you know you can trust these people. And then once you put them on your board of directors, trust what they're saying to you. If they tell you, I would not invest in a certain stock, or I would not invest in whatever it is, or I wouldn't go there, listen to what they're saying. Now, what I do is, if it's different from what I think, is I'll talk to 2 or 3 other people, corroborate their story. Generally, after you've talked to 3, 4 people, you get a consensus. One person may disagree because they had a bad experience, but the other 3 people say, no, that's a great place to go. Then I know that I've made the right decision.
Great. And I want to talk about budgeting. Like, how can people put the advices you gave into actions? How can they start budgeting? Like, what are the software they should use? Or they can just start with Excel sheet. Like, what are the steps? How would you recommend them to start this?
Yeah, so the first thing is to create a budget. That's the most important thing. You've got to have a guideline. You've got to have something with a framework to work within.
Yeah.
Then the other thing that I do, the next thing that I do, are take all the most important needs that you have, not wants, the absolute needs that you have to have. Well, if you're moving, you know you're going to have to pay rent. If you need transportation, you know you're going to need some kind of a car. If you know that you have to dress up for a job or wear a certain kind of a uniform for a job, you know certain things that you're going to have. Keep those to the minimum. But let's back into those for a second. So let's talk about a car. I don't need, you don't need, nobody needs a Mercedes, a BMW, a Jaguar, a Lexus, an Infiniti. You don't need that as your first car. So be very smart. You don't need high payments. The lower your payments are for a car, for example, the more money you could be putting into your index fund.
Yes.
That's where I want to see you spend your money. A car is a depreciating asset.
It is.
I cannot tell you. I just spoke at USC, the grad school, a couple weeks ago, actually about a month ago, and one of the things I talked about was cars. They said, please give us examples. We talked about cars. I got a letter back from an email from one of the guys that was in the class the day before. He says, Bill, I just want to tell you how much money you saved me. He says, I was just about to go out and buy a new Mercedes, and he says, I rethought what I'm going to do. I've decided to buy a used car and take the other money that I had saved up for a car and put it into an index fund. He says, I can't tell you, I woke up, I had a cloud lifted from me, and I felt like I was doing something good for myself. That's how I want people to think. Don't worry about what the Joneses or the Smiths think, or what they think of what you're doing, or what they're driving, what they're buying. You worry about yourself. You worry about the long term. I'd much rather see you have money parked in your portfolio than what you have parked in your garage. What you have parked in your garage means nothing. What you have parked in your portfolio can mean the difference between freedom and having to work for somebody else for the rest of your life.
You're right. How can a young generation overcome this? How can they start learning delayed gratification?
Easy. By something that I said earlier, by forming your personal board of directors, by asking people that are older and more experienced than you, what is the right thing to do? I have X amount of money. Should I buy a car? That's just one example. Mm-hmm. Or should I invest in an index fund? Should I buy this real estate possibility? Or should I go out on this great trip? Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not saying not to experience certain trips and certain experiences. And I'll give you a couple examples of things that I regret in my life. But if you take that money and you'll be able to look at it grow, if you have it in an index fund, if you have a Schwab account, a Vanguard account, there is nothing more exciting than every couple of months looking at your account and seeing how it's grown. There's nothing more exciting than that. And it also gives you peace of mind. Mm-hmm. When you have savings and you have investments, it gives you peace of mind. When you have that Mercedes, it's very exciting for the first couple of weeks, but after that, the excitement has worn off.
It goes away.
And it goes away, and it means absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Talk to people that are older, that are more experienced, that have been there, that have done that.
Yeah.
And they will tell you what's important in life, and they'll tell you what's not important in life. And driving a Mercedes, if you can't afford it, is not that important. Mm-hmm. But having an index fund, or having a mutual fund, or having stocks, or having bonds, that is what really means something.
Yeah.
Because what really means something is the life that you're trying to give your family as you get older. And I have twin girls. And when I had my kids, I wanted to make sure I had a nice house to live. We had a nice safe, we live in a good safe area, nice house, but that I had money put away for any emergencies. And if I would have spent my money on frivolous items like cars and clothes and jewelries and things like that, I would not have had the money for any emergencies that came up.
Yeah.
I felt much more secure with my life. And by the way, the single biggest person in your life, not just for your personal, but for finance as well, is your spouse. People don't understand how important it is to be in sync with your spouse. I've seen a lot of divorces where one person was a spendthrift, they just wanted, and the other person was a saver. Talk about that before you get married. Right.
But when we talk about money, I feel like it's not a topic that we should tackle on. Like,
Yeah.
so how would you say it?
So I would say you'd be wrong.
You'd be wrong.
Yeah, you'd be wrong. It's extremely important that you have that conversation for more than one reason. First of all, if you're not close enough to that person to be able to talk about money, then it may not be the right person to be marrying, or you may not have been dating long enough. My wife and I had a lot of conversations. And by the way, we had met when we were young, and then we re-met at a reunion for this trip that we took. And we were engaged within 2 months. We got married within a year. We had already had these conversations 2-3 weeks into our relationship. I talked to my wife about money that she owed on credit cards, and she owed money on credit cards. I said, Ann, this is not good. We're not going to live our life. But we loved each other so much that she knew that I was very financially responsible. Not that she wasn't, and she's become even better through the years. But she was open to listening to what I had to say. And I said, these are things that you just spent money on that you didn't need to spend money on. You have a wardrobe here that you don't need all of this. Let's be more efficient. So anyway, my first goal was to wipe out her debt because I didn't have debt. My first goal was to wipe her debt out, which we did. And then all of a sudden, we were a team of one. We were totally in sync on everything we did. In fact, through the years, she has said to me, I don't know if we need to be spending money on that. We don't really need to do this, or we don't need, and I can't tell you how close we are for a number of reasons. We were always in agreement on how we raised our kids. We were always in agreement on things to do in life, but we were always in sync on the money that we were spending.
What is the process like? So actually, my first question is, how do you actually initiate this conversation? What is the right approach to this?
Yeah, so I think it's got to be natural. It's got to be, you've got to get right into it. So if you're thinking about taking a trip together, if you're thinking about going to an expensive restaurant together, talk about it. And don't be afraid to say, wow, that dinner was $200. That was a lot of money for this dinner.
It is.
Or this trip that we're going on. Do we need to stay at a 4 or 5-star hotel? Especially when you're young. When we were younger, we didn't need such extravagant trips. So we said, let's stay at a 3-star hotel. Let's take a flight that maybe is a nighttime flight, an overnight flight, and we can save a little bit of money. Talk about those things. It comes in little pieces. It doesn't come in one big bite. Talk about it in little pieces. And then all of a sudden you start to get an idea, is this person the right, and both ways, is this person the right person for me, or is it do they have habits that I'm not going to be able to live with?
I want our audience to kind of visualize this. So you sit down and you say, honey, I think we should talk about how we're going to, what are the money we're going to spend on this trip? We should have a plan. Mm-hmm. Did it start like this?
Yeah, we did. But it didn't start with, honey, let's have a plan. It started with an incident that happened. So when I saw, we opened each other's mail, we got very close very quickly, which is unusual, but we were both ready. And I saw her credit card. I said, Ann, let me take a look at that credit card bill. And I saw all the things that were on there. I said, see these different things? They're unnecessary. You didn't have the money in your checking account to pay for it, or you were spending too much on these different things.
You were super straight.
I was super straight, and that's how you should be. The reason I've been married for 42 years. The reason we've been married so long is because I put her first and she puts me first. We completely trust each other with everything we've done. I'll be married to her for the rest of my life because we are so in sync on everything that we do. But one of the first things is it started with finances. It started with money. You've got to get in sync. The worst thing that you can do is be so in love with somebody, be so smitten with somebody that you just say, okay, this is the person for me. A few months into that marriage, you find out that you're completely have different ideas on finances. That will kill a marriage.
So give us a few questions that we can, ask our partner to kind of initiate this conversation. What are the specific questions we can ask? For example, maybe, honey, do you have a debt? Maybe we can start with that.
Yeah.
What are the other specific questions?
Yeah, I think it starts a little. I don't know that you need to be so forward right off the bat on asking, do you have debt? But you can find out a lot about a person right off the bat. What kind of a car do they have?
Okay.
Where do they live? How much money are they spending on frivolous things, on clothes, on dinners, on things like that? So you can get an idea about that person even before you start the conversation.
Maybe seeing how much that person is spending on what she needs or what he needs or what she wants.
Exactly.
Right? So see that portion. If it is balanced.
Right.
If it is off balance, it usually tells you, something about that person, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's the difference between needs and wants. But the other thing that I do, and it's a kind of a backhanded way to find out, I ask them about how they invest.
Oh.
I ask them about their portfolio. And sometimes if you're 25 years old, you're not going to have much of a portfolio. But if somebody has an idea and they say, oh yes, I have VTSAX, I have a Vanguard account, or I have a Schwab account, or I have a Fidelity account, and this is what I do, I know they're on the right track. I don't care if they have $1 million put away in a Fidelity account, but I do care that they have a Vanguard account or they have a Schwab account. I do, and I talk to them a lot of times in a backhanded kind of way about finances. And we'll talk about, so what do you think about this stock? And what do you think about this? And do you think Apple's a good investment? And if I know that they are interested or have an interest in learning more about that, that person's the right person for me.
Yeah, well, this is like a totally new aspect of seeing a romantic relationship is to see from a finance perspective. I think
it'll only stay romantic if you're in sync financially.
I like that one so much, man. I like that. All right. So we were actually talking about budgeting at first, but we kind of transitioned to this topic. But I loved it. So coming back to budgeting and kind of tracking your expenses. What are the specific actions younger generation can take?
All right. So I have a list of those. So the first thing is to pay yourself first. I want people to get into that habit that as soon as they get that first job or part-time job or internship, or whatever it is, and they're starting to get paid, pay yourself first. That's the first thing. So after you've done your budget and you know that you've got, I'm making up numbers here, you've got $2,000 of expenses and you're making $3,000. The first money goes towards your savings account. So if you've budgeted $500 to save, that's the first money out. The rest of the money goes to pay your expenses. Pay yourself first. That's the first thing. The second thing is, or actually the first thing was create a budget. So create the budget, then you know where your expenses are. Pay yourself first is next. Then the other thing that I strongly recommend to young people is automate your savings. So in other words, if you know that you've got a car payment, or you know you've got your rent or your more, automate it. Put it in there so that it automatically comes out. That way you don't have to worry about it, because you've already budgeted, you already know you've got a certain amount of money, automate where your money goes. The next thing is start an emergency fund. So there's 3 buckets of money. The first is your emergency fund. The second is your savings. And the third, which is the most important, is your investment account. So you break your money into 3. So your emergency fund is money that you keep in your checking account. That's money for any God forbids. Your washing machine and dryer break down. Your water pump in your car breaks. Your pump in your car breaks down. You get a flat tire. You need a tire. And those are emergencies. That's money that you need to have. That's the first thing. It's the most urgent, the least important, but the most urgent. The second is your savings. Those are things that you're planning for. So you're planning on going on a trip. You want to take money that you know is going to be fluid and mobile and you're going to have access to. That's money that goes into your savings account. That's also for secondary emergencies that you have. But the third, the least urgent, but the most important is your investment account. That is part of your, as we discussed earlier, that's your owned money. That's money that you own, not your employer, not your next door neighbor. That is money that you own. That's money that you can control. You want to get as much money into your owned or investment account as you possibly can. So those are the things. And then one last thing I want to put on that is start investing early. As early as you possibly can, open that Vanguard account. Open that Schwab account. Open that as early as you can. My kids had those accounts open when they were in high school. My kids used to be, cute little story, my kids used to be mother's helpers. So they were too young to babysit, but old enough to be, they were very responsible. I have twin girls, and girls grow up a lot quicker than boys. And so they were very responsible. We lived in a nice little neighborhood, and we had friends that their kids were a little younger than our kids. They were like 5 or 6 years. So they invited our kids over to come over and watch their kids while they worked or while they did the laundry or whatever it is they did. And our kids got paid a few dollars an hour. And after a while, they opened a savings account immediately at the bank, and they saw their money going in there. And after they got up to a few $100s or got up to $1,000, they said, "Dad, we have some money. We want to spend it on we want to spend some." I said, "Absolutely. Let's decide what you want to spend it on. What do you like?" "Well, we like going to the movies. We like buying clothes." I said, "Terrific." I said, "Who makes those movies?" So they looked up the movies. They said, "Well, this is a Disney movie. This is a Paramount movie." I said, "Terrific." I said, "You're not spending money on the movies. We'll buy your movie tickets. You take that money and you invest it in Disney and Paramount. You buy stock in those companies. So now you're doing something you want to do, and guess what? It's going to be worth a lot more tomorrow than it is today." So that's how they got started.
You actually just gave us a framework of how people should start working on their personal finance. So I think my first question is, shouldn't we clear the debt before we start saving?
Yes, debt is the first thing you want to wipe out. I believe that you have to have an emergency fund. That is the most important thing, because you have to plan for what you can't plan for. And so that's the first thing. The next thing is clearing up your debt, getting your debt. So before you start money in a savings account or an investment account, other than your emergency fund, you must clear up your debt, because debt is compounding. So just like good things compound, savings compounds, debt also compounds. A lot of people think, "Oh my God, I've got $1,000 Bank of America bill or Visa bill or American Express bill, and I'm only paying the interest off." Well, the debt keeps growing,
Yes,
and you'll never get that thing paid off. So pay off your debt as quickly as you can, and then start with your savings and your investment accounts.
I see. So having emergency fund first, then starts paying off the debt.
Yes.
And then start saving and investing.
Exactly.
So when it comes to emergency fund, how much is enough?
Well, you've got to see what your level of life is. So if you're just out of college and you know that you don't have a lot of debt, maybe you're living at home or your mortgage is very low, you can do the framework on how long it is. But I would say it should be at least 1 month of your earnings. So if you're making $3,000 a month, I think you should have a $3,000 emergency fund.
I see. And I heard
And
about...
by the way, as you get older, that should increase.
Yeah.
So as you get to be in your 30s or 40s, I recommend to have between 3 and 6 months. And then the savings account comes next, and then of course your investment account.
And once the person clears the debt, so what is the portion? How do I distribute my income towards different accounts? Like I heard about 50, 30, 20 rules.
Yeah. So I like to, what I do is I kind of work it backwards. I like to see 30% of your money going towards your investment account and savings account. At least 30% of your money. And I like to break it down even more, that I like to see 30% of your money going towards your investment, 10% money going towards your savings, and the rest going towards your expenses. But the key is, more important than those formulas, is how much you're spending on different things. Making sure that you're being very responsible for what you're spending. So it goes back to the car, it goes back to the trips, it goes back to how you're spending your overall cash flow. And if you're responsible with that, you'll be able to save more. Just remember, it's an end game. The quicker you can get to your FI number, your financial independent number, the quicker you can start making your own decisions in life. So I hear a lot of people say, "Oh, I can't wait to leave this job." Well, what are they saving? Well, I'm really not saving that much. So don't think about leaving that job yet, because you're not in a position. But people that can, and by the way, I will tell you on a personal note, I have made most of my money on my investments, not for my business.
Not from a career.
Not for my career. I've done well with my career. I've sold 3 or 4 different companies, and I've done fairly well. But I've made most of my money on the investments I've made in, by the way, people that were on my board of directors. Those are people that told me about opportunities. That's the other reason why it's so important to have savings and investment account, because you never know when the right opportunity is gonna hit you in the face. I'll give you one example. I have a very close friend, and we invested in a company that he had, and I knew nothing about the company. It had to do with software for motor vehicles. I had no idea, but I trusted him, and I knew he had a brilliant partner. And he says, Bill, we'd love you to invest in this company. He sent me the business perspective. I had no idea, I couldn't understand it. I mentioned to a couple friends, they didn't know much about it, but I trusted him. I invested in the company. Didn't see any money for 3 years. It was during COVID, it was during a very down time. All of a sudden, after the third year, we started getting checks for 100% of our investment for 4 straight years, until he sold the company to KKR, and we all made quite a bit of money. And he took us all, as a little side note, as a thank you, he took 14 couples to Bora Bora for a week. From that trip, we all came back and we said, let's throw $100,000 each into an investment fund. We've all invested, we have an investment group, which I'm on the committee for, into about a dozen companies. 2 or 3 of them have already paid off. Wow. So from one little investment from a good friend of mine, turned into quite a bit of an income.
Let's talk about your investment portfolio you have. So, and you mentioned index fund a lot of times.
Yes.
So what's so special about index fund? I know how it works, but I want our audience to understand why index fund is a great option.
Right. So I used to buy a lot of individual stocks, and your heart went up and down with how those stocks went.
It's volatile.
Exactly. But when you're in an index fund, there's a certain amount of protection there. And when you're with a Vanguard or a Schwab or Fidelity, and I have no preference, my kids are in Vanguard, I have Schwab and I have Vanguard, when you're in a little bit of a protected environment. And I am not brilliant when it comes to stocks. I don't know anything more than anybody else does, but I know that when you have these index funds, they're long-term, excellent growth. Warren Buffett did a little test several years ago, and he went to 10 of the biggest investment firms, and he says, I will bet each one of you $1 million that I'll take my index fund against your stock picks. After a year, 3 of them had already folded. They were so far behind. After 2 or 3 years, all 10 had already folded. So no matter how smart your investment guy thinks he is not going to beat an index fund. On top of that, it's a much lower cost of entry. Your fees are much less in a Vanguard index fund than they are with your Schwab broker or any kind of an individual broker.
Yeah.
So go with one of these accounts, invest in one of the smart 500, Standard & Poor's 500 accounts. There's several of them. I am now into some international index funds.
Yes.
So just whatever it is, ones that you pick, do your research, be smart, then stick to it.
Yeah.
And keep investing in it. Do not back out. The market is down. Don't worry about it. It will come back. Keep investing.
Just 8.2% of large cap domestic mutual funds outperformed the SP 500 over the past 20 years. So that is the power of the market. That's the power of the index fund.
Right.
And what are other options young generations can consider?
Yeah, real estate is another one. And I had fairly good success with real estate. And I'll tell you how my real estate career got started. When I was in college, my dad had a good friend who was we didn't know this at the time, but he ended up being a prolific real estate mogul. And he bought apartment buildings and he syndicated them. And at that time, you can put in almost any amount that you wanted. Usually it was in groups of $10,000 or $20,000. And, I was just getting married. I was just getting started in my career. So he was very nice, and my dad and I did a couple of investment groups together in the syndicate. And my dad said, just put in whatever you can put in. And when I had bonuses or things like that, I was able to put 25 into this one or 20 into this one. A great one came up where we bought together a share of 50. Of course, I only had 8. He put in 42, but he said, it doesn't matter. Put in whatever you can. Those were the best things I have ever been involved with. I got checks for 1% of my investment every year for 45 years, until one day he said, I'm aging out of the business. I want to sell the buildings. And I cannot tell you what kind of a check we got at the end of the day.
Well, I think people have this conception of, if you want to start investing in real estate, you have to have a lot of money and capital. Mm-hmm. Is that a misconception?
No, it's a misconception. There's a lot of REITs or syndicates that are out there. The key is to get into the right syndicate. Get a syndicate that's recommended to you. My dad was friends with this guy, so you can't have any better recommendation than from your father. Now, of course, not everything works out. Not every building that you're ever in will work out. But if you're in with the right group of people, and you diversify, and I'm a big believer in diversifying. I've got some of my money in real estate. I've got some of my money in index funds. I've got money in different areas. But the key is to be, and even when you're in real estate, with this gentleman, Mitch, his name was, we have 4 buildings. We were involved in 4 different buildings. Fortunately, all 4 of them did extremely well. But if one didn't do so well, I had leverage. I was able to balance myself with the other 3. Fortunately, they all did well. And by the way, I left that money in there for almost 45 years. And I kept getting checks every month. Every month, it was a beautiful thing. There is nothing in life as good as passive income.
Yeah, you're right.
And when you start to get a little older, in your 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s, and you have passive income coming in, and you can sleep at night, there is nothing better.
Great. Give us a specific plan, the step-by-step plan, how young generations can start investing. Like, for example, first step to open a Vanguard account or Schwab. What's the plan?
Yeah, that's the plan. The first plan, obviously, is to get a job.
Oh, yeah.
You need to get a job.
Have income.
After income, start to getting income. That's the most important thing. And by the way, don't wait for this magic job to appear for you. And it's almost like dating. Don't wait for the magic prince to show up for you or the magic queen to show up for you. You've got to go out and get what it is you can, especially with a job. Go out and get the right job for you. Are you in the right city where you want to live? Is it going to build your career? It doesn't have to be the perfect job. I told that to my kids. I said, it doesn't have to be the perfect job right off the bat, but get in with a good, reputable company. And once that happens, their careers build. So the first thing is to start getting consistent income. Once you've done that, you're over the hump. Now it's a matter of budgeting. And it's a matter of opening up that savings account and that investment account and start soaking as much money away as you possibly can. As your career grows, you do not want to deviate from saving and investing. There's something called lifestyle creep. You do not want to get boiled up into lifestyle creep. So when you go from making $50,000 to $100,000, you think your whole world is opened up. Don't do that. If you're living comfortably, I want you to take that extra after taxes, let's say it's under $25,000 or $30,000 or $35,000. I want you to take that money, use a little bit towards what you want to do, reward yourself a little bit, but put more money into that Vanguard account. I'll give you one quick example here of 1 or 2 regrets that I have in my life. One of my daughters was away a semester abroad, and she went to Florence, and she was there for 6 months. And she wanted us to come and visit, and we didn't. And I regret it. I regret it to this day. So as much emphasis as I'm putting on saving and investing, I do think you need to live your life. I do think it's very important to have these experiences. The second thing that I regret also with that same daughter is she got a job with a company in Japan. And she was there for about 5 months. And I had been to Japan a couple of times. My wife never has. And I was working quite a bit. I was traveling quite a bit. We were redoing our kitchen. I just didn't think financially it was the time to do it. Another thing that I regret. So again, I want you to enjoy your life. I want you to make sure that you're doing the things that will make you the person that you will become. And having those experiences with your friends or your family is very important. Just keep it in perspective.
Don't sacrifice your happiness because of
that. Exactly. Just make sure that you're on track for being where you want to be when you decide to retire. And if there's a couple of little roads that take you in a different way, it's okay. It's okay to do that. Just make sure you stay on track for the most part.